The Country Bear Jamboree is a guilty pleasure for many guests at Walt Disney World, but not me. I am unashamed about how much I love this show and its distinct cast of characters. The corny jokes, fun songs, and admittedly weird-looking bears combine to make the perfect package. I think most fans have a personal favorite bear. Big Al is probably high on the list of many, and he even has a small gift area named after him. Teddy Barra is another crowd favorite, and she used to have her own arcade in Disneyland. 3 of the most memorable characters in the show aren't bears at all, but the mounted heads of Max the Deer, Buff the Buffalo, and Melvin the Moose. Throughout the show, they crack jokes about the singing bears and join in a few numbers themselves. They come across as a less negative version of the Muppets Statler and Waldorf, who also had to deal with bear performers. The trio could also be seen in the mile-long bar at Disneyland and Disney World. In Disney World, these heads even sang sometimes for guests, while they were just stationary props at Disneyland. I remember as a kid wondering how they had gotten from the theater into the restaurant so quickly, but I was 7 years old and so swept up in being at a Disney park that I didn't think about it too hard. One comic suggests that they do have full bodies and are merely poking their heads through holes in the wall to watch the show. Either way, the charm of the mounted trio and the rest of the Jamboree overrides any potential morbid humor that could be derived from the fates of these animal heads. But one member of the trio was destined for a bigger career, at least for a little while. For whatever reason, Melvin the Moose appeared outside of the Jamboree and neighboring restaurants for a period of about 20 years. Let's take a look at what these shows were, and perhaps we can figure out why Melvin was highlighted in the first place. In 1984, the Country Bear Jamboree was given a holiday overlay in Disneyland and Disney World. Every winter, the show would become the Country Bear Christmas Special. This was also the premiere of a Christmas show over at Disneyland. Christmas Follies replaced the usual Fantasy Follies show, and Melvin was front and center, with an entire body this time. The exact dates of when this was performed and where are a little hard to find, but to the best of my ability, I've been able to find the following. The show was performed at least until 1990 in Disneyland at the Carnation Gardens. I found records of it being performed at the Fantasy Fair stage in Disney World in the early to mid-90s. After that, it was performed at the Diamond Horseshoe Revue until around 2005. The Disney World version was entitled Miss Minnie's Country Christmas. There also seems to have been multiple versions of the show, which makes sense given its nearly 20-year run. The basics of it have mostly been the same, and it goes as follows. Dressed in a snazzy robe, Melvin prepares for a Christmas party. Minnie Mouse, referred to as Miss Minnie for the duration of the show, enters. The two sing Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, with Melvin insisting that it's really Chris Moose they're celebrating. The Chris Moose pun continues throughout the show, with Melvin also making references to Mooseltoe. I'm almost positive Bullwinkle made those jokes before, but there are only so many moose puns out there. Chip and Dale drop by, along with a pair of human characters, who appear to have had the first names of the actors playing them in that performance. Everyone sings We Need a Little Christmas, or once again, in Melvin's case, Chris Moose. At this point, Melvin doesn't seem all that much like the Country Bears character. In addition to having a body to go with his head, he seems a bit brighter than the animatronic version, who was a rather dim bulb. His voice is a bit smoother too, and at points he sounds like he's doing a fairly passable Bing Crosby impression with his crooning. Thankfully, the Country Bear connection returns when 3 shivering bears enter the party: Wendell, Shaker, and Liverlips. The boys are getting ready to go skiing, but have stopped by for a good old-fashioned hoedown. This leads into an original song about having a country Christmas that I've genuinely grown fond of. It's really too bad there doesn't seem to be a higher quality audio version of it outside the various home video recordings. After that showstopper, the bears and chipmunks head out to the slopes. Goofy drops down the chimney dressed as Santa Claus, leading into another song. A crash is heard outside, and the bears and chipmunks limp in on crutches, covered in bandages, casts, and slings. Thankfully, their broken bones haven't dampened anyone's Christmas spirits. Another quick musical number ends the show. As I said, the show went through a few variations. One of the versions from the 80s, for example, had a plot about waiting for Mickey to return from helping Santa and worrying about his safety in the snowstorm outside. Sadly, the videos I found of this version lack the ending, but I assume Mickey makes it back okay. The voice cast in the 80s version were different actors than the ones we're more familiar with today. In the 90s, Minnie, Goofy, and the Chipmunks voice actors were replaced with the more recognizable voices of Russi Taylor, Bill Farmer, Tress MacNeille, and Corey Burton. One small but interesting thing I noticed was when the Country Bears enter. Liverlips actually has a last name, McGrowell. In the 80s version of the Christmas show, Minnie calls him Liverlips Louie. When I googled that name, the only results I got were for an ensemble character in Guys and Dolls. In the 90s version of the show, Minnie properly calls him Liverlips McGrowell. I noticed that in the non-Christmas version of the show from 1983, Fantasy Follies, Minnie also calls him Liverlips Louie. It's a little detail, but if I don't highlight it in this incredibly niche video, who will? The version of the show at Disney World's Diamond Horseshoe Revue in the later years also added a scene where a child from the audience comes on stage before Goofy arrives, so the hosts can sing Santa Claus is Coming to Town. 2005 was the final year I can find that Miss Minnie had her country Christmas, and it was also the last year the Country Bear Christmas Special was performed in Disney World. After that, they opted not to do the annual overlay, despite its immense charm. Over in Disneyland, a different Minnie's Christmas Party was performed in 2001 and 2002. It took clear inspiration from the country version, but it lacked the bears or the moose. Chip and Dale, for better or for worse, did make up for the lack of Christmas puns by singing We Need a Little Chris Mouse. If Miss Minnie's Country Christmas was the only show with Melvin, I probably wouldn't have made a video about him. But there was another show at Walt Disney World that was even more Melvin-centric. He was the headliner. In 1986, guests visiting Fort Wilderness could see the Melvin the Moose breakfast show in Pioneer Hall. The next year, it was renamed Chip and Dale's Country Morning Jamboree, featuring Melvin the Moose. But the point still stands that Melvin was the star. The show ran from 1986 to 1991. Given that time period, not that many videos or pictures have surfaced of the show, but thankfully there is a video recording of a full performance from 1990 on YouTube. Thanks to this, we can see that the show is just as endearingly corny as you'd expect. Before the show, the conductor, Oliver, introduces the Chipmunks, explaining that Chip and Dale are not only entertainers, they're also in charge of breakfast. The Chipmunks, dressed as chefs, run off to the kitchen to check on things. A cartoon plays as some other Disney characters mingle with the guests. Donald and Pluto can be seen in this video, and I read an account of someone saying they met Liverlips once. In addition to the Moose and the Chipmunks, the show had two human hosts, a pair of country folks named Cindy Lou and Alabama. They start the show proper with the song Good Morning, best known for its performance in Singin' in the Rain. A cranky voice is heard behind the curtain. It's Melvin, annoyed that they seem to have forgotten him, the star of the show. The curtains part to reveal Melvin the Moose as we know him best, a mounted head on the wall. This Melvin was a puppet who had moving eyes and ears. It seems they went through a couple Melvins over the years, with promotional pictures showing other versions. One puppet was even sold on eBay in 2014. The show is mostly a mix of country songs, with the notable part being Melvin explaining just how he ended up in his current predicament. Sung to the tune of On Top of Old Smoky, Melvin recounts that in the Moosehead Saloon, a cowboy questioned his moosehood. There was a terrible battle, and Melvin ended up crashing through the wall into the picture frame. In Melvin's own words, his terrible temper made him lose his head. The grand finale was a memorable one, and possibly a headache-inducing one for a few. Kazoos were passed out to the guests, and they all joined in for the Country Kazoo Symphony, in a rousing rendition of Old MacDonald Had a Farm. For the curtain call, as a final goodbye, the cast sang spoof of the Mickey Mouse Club March, in tribute to Melvin. Forever may we hold our antlers high. After these two shows, I don't think Melvin did anything else outside of the Country Bear Jamboree. He can be seen hanging with his friends today at both Walt Disney World and Disneyland. In Disney World, he's still at Grizzly Hall, performing with the Bears. In Disneyland, a Winnie the Pooh attraction stands in place of the Jamboree. Pooh might be a bear of very little brain, but he is also a bear of very large marketability. Luckily, Melvin and his mounted buddies can be spotted inside the Heffalumps and Woozle scene, taking in the psychedelic madness. The question remains, though, why Melvin? Why him specifically? He, Buff, and Max are memorable enough, but why did they just take the Moose? And as the lead in 2 live shows? Truthfully, I have no idea. Maybe one of the executives in charge of entertainment around that period really liked mooses. The Christmas Follies show, debuting the same year as the Country Bear Christmas, most likely had something to do with Melvin's role there, And the country theme of Fort Wilderness must have played a role in the breakfast show, but Melvin being highlighted is still very strange. I might as well share one other interesting Country Bear tidbit I found. This appears to be an early list of characters for the show during its development. We can see that its working title was the Country Bear Bash, and the characters were all given titles in addition to their names. Some make sense. Henry, of course, is the MC, for example. A few of these titles were even used within the show's promotional materials, like Ernest the Dude. Terrence the Shaker, in fact, is better known as Shaker today than he is as Terrence. Wendell is listed as Small Bear, which is true, I guess. Liverlips is just Liverlips, okay then. And Trixie is the Loser. Oh dear. Buff the Buffalo's original name was Marvin, and Big Al's original name was Big Herbert. And there you have it, folks, the solo career of Melvin the Moose. Ultimately, it's a fun, weird little footnote in Disney theme park history, but I've definitely had a good time researching it. Okay, Wendell, don't panic. Remember what the instructor said. If you ever get into trouble, all you need to do is... Feels like I'm wearing nothing at all. Nothing at all. Nothing at all. Oh, stupid sexy shaker.